Covens in Europe, in America, and in Australia, and they have one right here. That whole bunch. The parties with the singing and the flute and the chanting, those are espas or Sabbaths or whatever they're called. Read what they do, Guy. They use blood in their rituals, and the blood that has the most power is baby's blood.
Hi, welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of Covendom. We are back after our Hexfest hiatus. Tonight's episode is going to be about the Priesthood of Witchcraft and what that means to us. So before we get into that, we're going to start with our tarot card of the season. I think it's more appropriate to say season instead of week.
Is it? So tarot deck of the day.
This is your Halloween, good, bad, and ugly.
God preserve us in our sanity and our livers. So this is a 19th century Italian Marseille deck. So it's a very classic, like 19th century imagery. I always like Marseille decks. When I read a text, that's all I use. No shade on the Rider Waite.
Yeah, you kind of converted me to it. Yeah.
It's better. It just is. Give it a few knocks, Brian. You want to cut it?
Yeah. There's always one answer to that question.
The tarot of... Are we doing season?
Sure.
Is it that broad? It's that broad. Oh, okay. The Seven of Swords.
That's not necessarily...
It's not necessarily bad,
all bad.
Right? Secrets. Sometimes it's read as a thief. You know what? Bravado. Power.
Our lives.
I mean...
And most appropriate for the show.
I feel personally not okay. It's fine. It's fine.
So, Levi, why don't you start with what you're hoping to get out of tonight's show, and then I will... first our show and tells. Sorry.
Yes, and
What's
it's
yours?
Rosie.
Your show and tell? Yes.
My show and tell is a British person.
Hello.
Yeah, that's me.
I forgot the name. Sorry. It's been a while.
My name.
I didn't say our names either. Usually I'll say I'm Brian Cain. This is my co-host.
Our names are on the screen.
Levi Rowland. And this is our special guest, Rozi. You're saying...
James.
Okay, just making sure.
My name.
I was going to go to the other one for a second. Rozi James, it's her last name.
It is.
It's my real last name.
Rozi James is a priestess, a high priestess from England. She now lives in, is it
Shrewsbury.
Shrewsbury.
Or Shrewsbury if you're being posh and southern, but I'm not.
Southern.
So it's Shrewsbury.
And she works in Oswestry, so she's pretty well
I work
known.
in Shrewsbury.
Oh, do you work in Shrewsbury?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not up to
Do you
date.
mean magically or?
I meant in working groups.
Oh, Oswestry.
Okay, she's in Oswestry Coven. So which is where I first met her all those years ago, and she is kind of fallen in love with New Orleans a little bit in some ways. This is her home away from home. So yeah.
My fourth trip back.
It is your fourth trip back.
Been here a month this time.
Tried to do a show with her last time, but you know how things go. So we're so glad to have her tonight. So she's going to bring some dignity to...
God,
Don't build me up too
to
much,
this.
Brian. I've already drunk some
So
wine.
now your show and tell. Yes.
My show and tell was that we had Rosie.
Oh, that's a
That was
cop out.
mine. No,
You
I
didn't even invite her. I did.
Technically, Brian
still
brought me.
counts.
So.
You know what? First of all, it's been a long day. Like, I'm just saying. This is Rosie. She writes things beautifully.
She writes things.
Right thing.
Yes. Rosie has a book coming out. And
A novel, not a magical
A novel,
book.
yeah. It's called The Beginning and the End of Us, right? Got that right?
Beginning and end of us.
Yes.
And it is available in the US.
And who was your
She's
publisher?
Bookature is the publisher, so it's they're an ebook publisher, but it's also available in paperback and audiobook.
And it's going to be on Amazon as well.
Yes.
I believe that we will, even though it's a novel, it has some magical elements, so we'll probably be carrying it at Hex and Omen as well.
On the 21st of November.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We're so proud
we've
of
got
her.
a lot of authors in the nucleus. It's very cool. And Rosie actually she helped advise me when I was writing my book, gave me some really good advice that I actually did use as a writing tool, so that was very much appreciated.
It was a pleasure.
And she wrote a blurb for my book as well.
So sweet.
So Levi, what do you want to get out of the episode tonight? What does this episode mean to you?
I'm tired, and no, I'm kidding. I just want to sit here and drink Riesling and talk about magic for an hour. No, priesthood. I think it's the reason I like this topic is because it's what kind of shocks people and takes them away from the conversation that happens in witchcraft now that it's become so popular. When you start talking about a priesthood, a lot of people who are just getting into witchcraft have never heard it described as that.
No.
So
And yet that's how I define myself.
Same.
More than witch, probably. priestess.
So that's what I want to get out of it, is like kind of shocking people a little bit into that idea of what witchcraft can be in terms of its religious nature, its priestly nature, as opposed to just a magical practice that's become very popular. And people get shocked a little bit by that term when you're like, oh, no, we're priests. This is a priesthood. And I think people like that.
Yes. I was trying to think of a show that would be good with Rozi being here, and I thought, great time to do this show because then we have the perspective of a priestess, and there,
She's a woman.
There is a difference, I think this is a conversation that doesn't occur. I think there's a huge assumption that people who are initiated into the older traditions and describe, their witchcraft as a priesthood, or if they describe themselves as initiates, I think people think we're all elitists and egotists.
It's true.
I'm definitely an elitist.
I was about to say, are we just going to let that hang in the ether backward?
Yes. But I also think that the opposite is true. I think that, when you find sincere initiates, their pursuit of craft is humble. It's not arrogant at all. There's a difference between public persona and what's actually going on within our hearts and our magical circle.
Yeah.
We have a public persona, so...
You don't think you do. It's slowly emerging.
Yet.
Yes.
Yet.
Yes, it's coming. But anyway... so tonight I think I want to explore, because this perspective is very individual as well, because you're talking about a path that has a collective and it is a community in a sense, but it's also split off into different covens that all have autonomy, and then it's reduced to your own personal experience. So having three perspectives is great. We do have a live member audience tonight. It's Carrie Ewers, who is a priestess of the Alexandrian tradition. You may or may not know her, and she's a member of my coven. So she won't be calling in with questions. She'll just be asking here if she wants to. If you do have questions tonight at any time for any of us or collectively, you can call us at 504-321-3472.
I love the weird voice every time. We're waiting to take your call.
We're waiting to take your call.
Alexandria tradition, can we help?
So why don't we get right into it? Perhaps let's start in, try to reduce it to, a few paragraphs. What inspired you to become a priest or a priestess? Let's start with Rozi. What inspired you to become a priestess? What was that pivotal moment when you said, I want to become a priestess, I want to enter into this thing?
I think for me, I grew up in a really rural area, so the idea of magic or of divine presence being in nature was already there. I spent a few years not wanting to share that with other people until I met my teacher and High Priestess Val. Hi Val. We love Val. Blessed.
We're Val worshippers.
A little
bit. She is worshipable.
She's our cult of personality.
She would hate that.
She doesn't even know it. She taught us all to drink. We were all completely dry before. Just remember.
I was a Quaker.
What inspired me to become a priestess? I think it was a drive to dive more into the occult, first and foremost. I'd got to the point where I didn't feel like there was more I could learn on my own from reading books, and I wanted to explore knowledge from the point of view of people who knew more than I do, which is a lot of people. And then after that, I think it was a sense that I want to give something back. I've always been one of those people who, I'm saying a lot, sorry. I'm always been one of those people who my friends and family tend to come to me with problems, and it's something I enjoy doing is feeling connected to people by participating in resolving issues that they have. And I think the idea of being part of a priesthood and being able to perform public rites for people, hand fastings or wickenings, was something that I felt driven to do. And I think I didn't feel maybe that I had the authority or the right to do that as a solitary witch. So I think joining a caste of people, and I think it is a caste who had that authority and who could train us in ways that allowed us to develop to that point and feel that we held that power was something that I really wanted to pursue. I just thought I could do more. I could do more of what I wanted to do anyway by being initiated. So, and then the reason I wanted to be a high priestess is because I went mad. I drank too much wine and thought it sounded like a good idea.
That sounds fun. Love it.
Yeah, but no, training other people is really rewarding. I'm not somebody who... I'm maternal to my friends and my family, but I'm not someone who wants children. So I think the idea of being able to give some of that maternal instinct via a different route was really important to me, and train people.
Oh, yes.
Give something back. Yeah.
Yes, blessed be.
Blessed be.
Right, Levi, you're up.
I met a goat in the woods. No, some things happened. I think I've talked about my story on other episodes of Covendom before, where I was very, very religious when I was younger. I was a convert to Catholicism and wanted to be a priest with Dominicans, and then left that and was very, very angry and sort of a non-believer for some time, and I couldn't make that work. So no matter what I did, I kind of tell people I'm just fated to be, religious. Like, it's just sort of like in the stars. I always joke that, Jupiter's in the ninth house for me, which I think in one of Ptolemy's books he says is like the mark of the priest or whatever. But like, it does feel something that was fatalistic to me, and it felt right to give up fighting it. And I think a lot of people who end up priests or spiritual leaders in any tradition, some of the ones that end up the most devoted fight it the worst in the beginning. They're always the ones that, are like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm trying so hard not to be this. And I did that for a long time, and then finally just could not handle it anymore. Realized that, like, this is who I am. Like, my life revolves around this. It's going to be about the occult. It's going to be about craft. It's going to be about God. And if that's rough, and if that's weird, and if that's going to be a hard life, then damned if I do, damned if I don't. So, I had to make that jump and just have, and I know a lot of witches don't like the word, but faith that, like, it was right and something was there, right? That I wasn't jumping into a void. That there was something waiting. And there was. It turned out I was right, thank God. Like, could have been wrong.
It's all real.
Yeah, could have ended up, just smoking opium and crying a lot,
Well, we did that anyway, right?
I mean...
But now there's purpose behind it.
But now there's purpose behind it. It feels very divine. Like, God comes through. She's very happy. But that's why I became a priest, because I realized I do think people who are called to spiritual leadership are sort of fated to do so.
Do you think it's because we've done it before?
Possibly.
Because I have that feeling.
I have a very weird concept of reincarnation where I think it's all happening at once. Like, I don't believe in linear time beyond death, but like,
Levi's obsessed everywhere.
Exactly. In every possible dimension.
That's why we love him.
It's in every dimension right now. I am ruining a public situation by bringing up religion. Like, I am at somebody's funeral on another plane right now, going like, let's talk about the Kabbalah. Like, it's like, it's just who I am. Yeah, so I agree with you, though. I think there is a fate aspect to it. So whether it's a reincarnation belief or a fated by the stars or fated by your nature, or even if it's just genetic, whatever it is, I do feel like I was kind of fated to fall into this role. And I wasn't comfortable or easy until I finally accepted it.
Yeah, because I remember reading a lot of witchcraft-related literature and feeling like it was something not necessarily that I'd seen before, but it already made sense. Mm-hmm. I came across things, I was like, I know this.
Yeah, I know it to be true.
And it's like it was like relearning something that I hadn't put words to before, but was already in there. So I think there was an element of being called back to something rather than called to something, definitely.
And the mythology is there of that too. Think of, Taliesin, who accidentally becomes, the enlightened child of Cerdwan or whatever. After a year and a day of hard work, though, it's like there's all these hints in mythology of sort of, you fight it, the trickster aspect of it, the contract with the devil, even in the witchcraft, mythology or whatever, the Sabbath mythology. I didn't really know who he was. It's there, and it is fatalistic, and in a beautiful way, though. So yeah, I think
it's still a choice. I think that's an interesting thing with the word fate.
Yes.
I think it's still a choice.
It is.
You are pushed in a certain direction, but you still have the option to, like you say, fight it or go with the current. Yeah. And I think it makes life easier.
I was going to jump in and say, I didn't have a choice. But now that you say that, actually I do believe what she says is true. It felt like I didn't have a choice because it was something, and it was like a salmon being called,
to the stream.
The stream. Like, you felt this innate pull. My experience wasn't really that profound in the sense that I sort of always saw witchcraft as a priesthood. So the choices people have to make today, they've got a plethora of definitions. I was always introduced into the sort of Gardnerian or Alexandrian, way of theology of looking at the craft. And I never thought of it as anything else. However, the goddess was the big epiphany for me.
Yes.
And I talk about this quite often. At 15 years old, the idea that there even was a goddess was like this huge thing to me.
As a woman.
And the acknowledgement that there had been huge civilizations that, they were worshipping a goddess. And it wasn't a concept that currently existed. It was a huge epiphany to me. So I didn't feel like I had a choice because it had become such a strong desire. And from that desire was born the dawn. And his name was Lucifer. So,
it's beautiful, really.
I definitely felt
Isn't it?
a pull,
It is.
I felt a pull to the craft, and when I made the choice, because you do make a choice, really, or we think we do, but you make a choice, and I think Rosie's right. I think I could have chosen to do something else.
Yeah.
But once you go down, it's just the desire grows and grows. I still have that. All these years later, I still have that desire that pulls me forward, and that is what pulls me forward. We love what we do. We made a choice to do something, and we can go on all the time. We don't. But people will go on sometimes about how hard it is or how difficult it is. And it does have its challenges. But we absolutely love what we do. It's
100%.
way more rewarding 100%. To us. We love our work. But it is work, and it is
I see a face over here.
There are times.
Yeah.
Yes, Rosie.
It has its moments.
Yeah.
I think...
Why don't we go into that? What are your challenges?
Well, I think for me the biggest challenges initially were learning to go with that current, learning not to fight against the tide. And I think that I can't remember the exact point that it happened, but there was a switch over. I've always had that instinct, that inner voice. I think everybody does, and I think some people listen to it more than others. And when I wasn't listening to it, life was hard, and now that I've started going with it more, I'm not saying that life's perfect or that everything's easy, but it certainly there's less resistance. It feels very much like you
Things
can feel out when it's going the way that you're supposed to be going, and you can feel when you're not. And I think actually for me, celebrating the Sabbats year after year after year makes you more aware of those currents and which direction you're being pushed or pulled in, more prepared for them when they come up as well. We talk about the spring equinox particularly being, we think spring, it's this gentle unfurling of buds, but no, it's more like ice melt.
It's like going in puberty.
It is like, and I think
What's
when you're aware that that's coming. Oh, it's spring. Oh yeah, of course.
You should come with a little book that your parents awkwardly leave on the bed table.
Spring's coming. But
I
certainly
for young
think.
witches.
What was the question again?
What challenges do you? What do you find challenging about? And I don't mean to turn this into a panel. I think I have. But we'll do it this last time, and then we can ask individual questions. But what challenges do you encounter?
I actually
what
think
is your challenge?
It's so complicated.
So difficult.
Depends on how many people are invited.
It's a lot usually.
All the people. Not all the people.
I mean, I could have chipped it too.
Sometimes.
Different situation. No, I think the challenges for me have not been. I don't want to say it because.
Say it, do it.
Because it's just going to start happening the other way. But for me, the challenges have been in outer life far more than in craft. Craft has been my safe space, even though it's hard. But I think craft is somewhere where I feel empowered and I feel I don't know about in control, but able to affect change. I think when that translates into outer life, sometimes it's more difficult to. I think for me, and it kind of goes back to the original question about priesthood, really, you're suddenly able to be the master of your own fate. You're suddenly in a situation where, you do have a choice in everything that happens, and that's a huge responsibility. And I think that I can understand why some people shy away from that and would prefer to put it in the hands of a higher being, you know. And I think, accepting that and embracing that and deciding, no, actually, I am going to take charge of this and I'm going to make life what I want it to be, has probably been my biggest challenge, because it's scary to do that. It's scary to think everything's either my fault or my own victory personally, and that, you know, obviously we draw from the gods, and I think that power comes from them, so of course that's what you're drawing on, but ultimately it's yours to do what you want to do with, and that's frightening sometimes, but also beautiful and wonderful.
Don't say me. Don't say me.
Brian, 100% Brian. No, the biggest challenge ever.
He likes it. He likes the abuse.
Wow.
That's been your biggest challenge.
It got a little weird. Two things. First of all, my tendencies are not the topic of the show. But no, the first thing I'll say is, going back to this whole idea of choice, though, and it ties into challenge, we had a whole show about rebellion, and I said something on it that I still stand by. There are two concepts of freedom and choice, like in philosophy, historically, and theology. One is just free will, right? It was my choice to be a priest or my choice not to, or whatever, and free will is real. But there's a long tradition in spiritual traditions, and this particularly religious philosophers, of saying true freedom is the freedom to become what you were meant to be. Like, true freedom is not just anarchic choice, right? You know, like, true freedom is the freedom to become what you were meant to be. A lot of Christian philosophers.
Yes, there you go.
So that's kind of my concept when it comes to the whole I chose to be a priest. Well, yes, I did, but because that was my fulfillment, right? And I am glad I have that freedom, my true will.
But that's self-actualization, surely, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's what makes that confusing.
Embrace
God and the
we
self
were in tune
are different
when we made that choice. Not everyone is.
I think the biggest challenge for me with priesthood is a weird one that maybe people will think is snobbery, but
it's all right.
Never. I kind of have a hard time functioning in the mundane world. Like, I have a very normal, quote unquote, job. I don't think so, because it's very stressful. But I have a job that is like not magical necessarily. I think it is, but it's not. I'm not working in a witchcraft shop. I'm not, from 9 to 5. And sometimes I do have a hard time connecting with people because they want to talk about a Netflix show for 4 goddamn hours, like straight, and I'm just like, I don't care. Like, oh my God, I don't care.
Aren't even real people, and even if they were, I don't care enough to talk about it.
And so, like, sometimes I do find it's alienating sometimes because most people don't. Fun fact: most people don't want to sit around and talk about religion, the occult, and their Kabbalah for hours on end. Like, most people don't.
Yeah, no, true.
I found that after my first degree that I was suddenly very aware of. This is going to sound really snobby and elitist, but it's true.
Yep.
I was very aware of muggles after my first degree.
Christian is just going to fall in love with you because you said that.
Well, that's probably true, that confirms that I shouldn't have said it. Love you, Christian. No, I really did, and I think it took. Oh, sorry, sound effect. It took me a little while to come back round to that initial core belief that being set apart doesn't make you better than. It's different. You know? I can see you trying to keep a straight face.
No, it's true.
Yeah, being different does not mean better.
I have said that myself.
Like, quietly when no one was listening.
No, I mean, I don't think we're better than anyone else.
No.
Perhaps more evolved.
That's sort of better though, right?
No, not necessarily.
No, I came
not
back
than everybody. There are non-initiates who are evolved. A few of them.
All 6 of them.
A lot of them.
They're all working for UNICEF.
No, I've actually been very impressed with a lot of non-initiates I've met this year. I think there's a new magical generation coming up, and I'm not talking about age. I'm talking about a current.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to jump on that soapbox, but it's something I recognized very recently. But I don't want to get back to that. Maybe ask me about that, because it's really good.
Ask me about this.
Brian,
important.
what about that?
Well, I want to answer my part of it, because I've been thinking about what are my challenges.
Challenges are you eat up with when the pool filter doesn't work?
There's 2, really. I'm going to ignore you said
I
that.
know.
There's 2.
When the
Which
dry
first
cleaner
world
stains the
problems do you want to
Versace.
talk about?
You know, I was in Covendom recently, and I was talking. I said, I've got the same problem that a lot of the occultists had. And usually this would be a story about Levi, but tonight it's about Ronaldo. And Ronaldo said, you're crazy,
Yeah, fair.
And I had to kind of step back for a second and be like, well, maybe. I think that sometimes that, and this probably translates to anyone in the priesthood, and it goes kind of back a little bit to what Rosie was saying with it being her safe space. There's an old sort of like fairy mythology about like if you spend too much time in the fairy realm, or if you eat there, or if you make love there,
you
don't ever get to leave, And if we're going to intellectualize that as we do, it could be a metaphor. If you spend too much time in the spiritual world, that you could get trapped there. It's a dance going back and forth. I think I do find it challenging sometimes to recognize, especially in the fact that this has crossed over into my business world and mundane world. Almost every conversation in any given day in some way in my life goes back to witchcraft. So I actually quite treasure those moments when it does not sometimes. It doesn't change my love for the true craft, but at times I'm like, I want to talk to somebody. I'd rather talk to somebody about how they think they're a vampire, because it's just different.
We know one.
If that's my sane moment, we have to ask questions about that.
Sweetie.
I don't want to talk to a Mormon or anything like that. But,
I do. I love weird religions.
My second difficulty is someone once said to me that they thought of me as rather naive. And I think there's an element of that is still true, because it comes with, and I'm not trying to, sound like this, but there's a part of me that I think is remain pure, and I'm quite thankful for that, because a lot of me's not, but there's a part of me that has remained pure. And it comes from sincerity. Yeah. I still have that. No one's been able to take that away from me. But I will say, yes, knock on wood. The other thing I find very difficult, and that was very shocking to me that I encountered about 2013, moving into 2014, is politics in the craft. I don't think witchcraft should be Game of Thrones. And I've had to sort of encounter that on a broader world nowadays. That's hard for me. I'm very privileged that I have always had wonderful covens, and I've associated with wonderful covens. So in my magical world, that's not the case. But being any kind of witchcraft public figure, owning shops, running festivals, now having a book, you start encountering...
It's really good. You should read it. If you haven't read it, I'm going to plug Brian, because I know he's rubbish at plugging himself. Definitely read that book.
Well, rubbish about plugging my book.
Yeah.
I was about to say, reword.
I'm fabulous.
He's aware.
Yeah, let me edit that.
Bad attention span.
Well, we were talking earlier about how we're terrible parents for our creative endeavors. It's like,
good
you're
luck,
born,
guy.
off you go.
My students probably feel that way. Yes, you're a third degree. Good luck. See you later.
No. Yes.
Goodbye. Hope you survive.
His book is wonderful.
The gauntlet.
And I think, as I said in my blurb that I wrote for it, I think that you did an amazing job of marrying intelligent and well-researched information with a sense of the beauty that we get from craft. I think that's a really difficult thing to do.
And you helped me with that. One of the things Rosie advised me is, she said, you've got to always ask yourself, are you adding too much in? What are you trying to say? And that really helped my writing style, because I love to go down rabbit holes.
No.
That's why I had to stop myself earlier.
Never.
And I don't even remember where I was going to go, but it was... Oh, no, I do now. So
we'll get there eventually.
I a few times went on tangents in my book and had to relook at it and go, this has nothing to do with, I just went on a tangent.
It's easy to do that when you're writing, though, especially if it's about a subject.
Sometimes it turns 3 pages into a paragraph, but it started catching up with me where I'd think about it,
snip it
and
down.
Stop doing it. Yeah. Focus on what you're focusing on.
Incidentally, my fiction book, novel, that's the word, the original version was 210,000 words long, because I didn't know how long novels were supposed to be. I think now it's like 98
It was like
or
a
something.
saga.
Yeah.
It was huge. It could have been a trilogy.
And then in their next line.
Exactly. Song of Ice and Fire, anybody?
So my last little thing is that really is hard for me as a priest is I forgot my wine wipes tonight. And we're supposed to go out afterwards, and I'm terrified of having purple teeth because then you just look like you have a dental problem.
I'm British, so everyone has a dental problem.
That nobody's addressing.
They look better on camera.
We're all just letting
really
it happen.
wonky.
I worry.
White wine, Brian. That's all I'll say. White wine.
Yeah, but where we're going, that translates to paint thinner.
True.
Yeah.
Shout out to everybody in the
Rum
comments. Hey Kim, Carrie, Christopher, Ed, all the people saying hi. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Welcome
If you have
back.
questions, feel free to ask on YouTube or Facebook. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and like Hex Education.
And if you'd like to join the conversation,
again with the voice.
504
If you dare.
321 347.
You're shooting for more 1980s Tifo psychic. He sounds more like one of them ladies on the phone, come on at like you know,
a porn,
like
a
2
porn.
o'clock.
Don't
in the
judge
morning.
me. You don't know how I made a living before all this. Don't judge me.
I have suspicions actually and psychic ideas. And
You don't
yeah,
know. You don't know me.
So,
I know you pretty well.
on that note, the thing I'm really interested about
The audience is correct.
audience.
What did they say? What?
No, that audience.
Oh. Yeah.
What were you curious?
I'm curious about how you feel being part of the priesthood has impacted your outer life. We've kind of answered that a little bit, but I'm talking
What outer
more,
life?
Yeah, okay.
Does not
For Brian, it's not like
Does not apply.
Levi.
Yes.
In what way?
Hi, I have a 9-to-5 job.
More just in the sense of the ethics, I guess, or the responsibility that you feel as priesthood. Does that play out in outer life at all in terms of politics or environmentalism
I can
or
answer
lifestyle
that one, but you first.
or general ways of interacting with people?
Yes, there's a couple things that it impacts pretty greatly. I feel a knee-jerk. I do have knee-jerk reactions to certain political things that craft has made me care about a lot, and I won't go into them because I do not want to make this a political show. But things like the right to choose and things like that, it does give me a certain knee-jerk protective sort of. It's a goddess religion, in many ways. It's a god and goddess religion, but in a patriarchal age, the goddess religion aspect of it matters.
If they don't get initiated, they don't deserve to know our God. So let's just talk about the goddess.
Okay. I mean, it's fair. I'm not mad at it.
I'm not gonna, yeah.
But no. So yeah, it does do that. I do feel.
And
like
if you want to get initiated, if they want to see, let them see.
let them see. Yeah. Are
But
you ready?
be careful
to
what
meet
you
him?
wish for because
Are you ready to
will
meet him?
get it.
Are you ready? No, but it does impact that, and environmentalism too, to a large degree, because it is an earth-centered religion, or is supposed to be. In many ways, it's a fertility cult. But it also, in other ways, has, I think, like I was talking about earlier, sometimes it cuts you off from people. Like, I feel disconnected.
But it gives you the best other things, not people, just other things.
I'm uncomfortable.
Demons, These are my gifts.
These are my gifts. Why do you always quote the people in movies who end up tragically destroyed? Like
they're the fun ones.
They are the fun ones.
Prophecy, I think.
Actually, Cersei Lannister, if you really read that line, she won.
She died.
They all died. She was the last queen of the Iron Thrones. Everyone cool died except Jon Snow, and then by then he was boring. And they
You're not wrong. The last season was terrible, but witchcraft was not supposed to be
Anyway, back to your conversation, because
Yes.
I'm negating.
No, I love it.
it.
Honestly, though, to answer your question, it does impact my everything. And the further I go along in priesthood, the more that it is my identity in toto. So I don't know how to answer the question from outside the perspective of priesthood. Every single thing is from the perspective of witchcraft. Witchcraft is not a hobby in our path. Witchcraft is not something you do because you want magic to happen. That's magic, and magic exists in 1,000 traditions.
Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
In our tradition, there is only priesthood. There is no laity.
And if their magic doesn't work, we push them into a ditch. We cover it up with sand, and we don't talk about them anymore. I actually can answer this question because I wasn't always in the public spotlight. It was before I was Alexandrian, but I did run a coven in Washington State. It was BTW styled. We did things a bit more Gardnerian, but it was other. It wasn't Gardnerian. It had a lineage, but we won't get into all that right now. It was other. I think that's what I
read his book, and you will find out all about it.
Yes, I do talk about it. No, thank you. But I worked a 9-to-5 job. I was a management person for various retailers, and I still run my coven now. We didn't meet as often as we do, but it went on, and that was still that innate pull happened a long time before I became Alexandrian.
Yeah.
You know, so I very much still consider myself priesthood, and in that world, I was probably in the most authentic line that there was there, you know, and I wasn't connected to anything global at all. I still felt the same way. I felt like, well, this job sucks, and these people are boring, and I can't wait to get off to the Sabbath, or have a conversation, or meet a vampire who's not really a vampire.
Again with the vampire, it's
werewolves.
a trend.
Werewolves are great,
Thing.
especially if they turn in bed.
tail.
That's the fun time.
What is it?
The guy with
Lycanthropy?
the tail.
Werewolf.
I
Oh,
think you're
Carrie's
just talking
having
about-
fantasy now.
I think you're just talking
Werewolves.
about furries.
Oh, maybe.
You're just talking about those people on Tumblr that, like, you know what, I'm not going to get into it, it's
No.
fine. Everybody needs a hobby, who am I to judge? God bless you. Like,
Now, I also have something to add about the ethics bit.
Yes.
I never really had a problem with following craft ethics. You know, they don't bother me. They never have. You know, I've never disagreed with the standard craft ethics. I also don't disagree with the ununderstood ones. But getting in the public spotlight, they're very much a helpful reminder sometimes, especially conduct, because I have at times fallen into the sort of social media trap of popping off.
at times.
No, I don't mind it if I'm controversial, but I'm talking about popping off and saying, well, you're a loser or something like that. You know,
I've seen it.
You think this is rare?
it is rare. I don't do that very
I'm so
often.
sorry.
I might make a
gonna
blanket
drink and
statement.
That's a big.
Anyway, it's all documented. You can find out for yourselves.
Yeah.
But
Don't go down that rabbit hole.
I'm not talking about people who have sensitive feelings. I'm talking about like an individual conversation to where I have
Of course.
popped off on a person personally. And I don't think that's a good thing to do as priesthood. You know, I think that either disengage or say what you have to say and disengage. You know, I don't think that we should be in the business of pointing the finger publicly. I've done it before, and it doesn't ever end well.
No, you pointed it privately. You shame them in private.
And then you get to the point where you might have certain Facebook groups that are sort of like, you know, we've got several initiates in there. You know, I've got those. There have been times it turns into a prana fest, and the non-initiates don't know what's going on or what you're talking about, and just makes
It's shop
everyone
talk.
look bad.
Yes, all shop talk and you look crazy.
Yes, and they're
Yeah.
like, well, I don't want to be a part of something this drama queenish.
Which is fair.
It is fair.
I think for me it's played out in a few different ways. Like I'm going to do that thing that everybody says vegans do all the time. But I'm going to bring up the fact that I'm vegan.
Yeah.
It's not from
Keyboard is made of leather.
keyboard warrior. It's not made of leather.
No, it's made in a
sense it.
sweatshop.
Yeah,
Like,
that's fine. That's people.
by indentured servants. It's fine.
That's not, Moving on. No, I think, and in other ways, you know, I think it's made me think more seriously about my personal impact on the wider world. And I think that comes from a sense of personal power.
And you're also a country witch.
I am a country witch.
That does make a difference.
But I also think that when disempowered people don't feel that whatever they do is going to make a difference. So there's no point. There's no point in trying to be
And I think we all
your
feel
best
that way
self.
sometimes in social climates.
Sure.
Or political climates.
Political
Sorry,
climates,
I meant to say.
But politically as well, you know, I think that having maybe an overinflated ego, I don't know, but having a sense that what you do matters, and that even small actions, you know, essentially working magic is
That ritual was
working on
perfect.
that.
It was the most perfect ritual everyone ever saw. It was perfect. Everyone said it was perfect.
But working magic, when you're working on a microcosmic level to affect macrocosmic change, essentially what you're doing is saying that every action I take in this space matters. And I think that when you've done that for a few years, that belief does expand outwards, and you start to realize and acknowledge your impact on the wider world as a human being. So for me, I think, you know, I'm only bringing up the vegan thing because that's like the first example that comes into my head. But
it's good for the environment.
It's good for the environment, but also it's something that I think, well, No, every animal I don't eat or
You don't know what child laborers are picking the plants. You can't control that.
And monkeys for coconut
What?
oil. Check your coconut oil.
Okay, we're going down a rabbit hole.
But anyway,
What does that even mean?
I will explain later. But yeah, you know,
Is this Planet of the Apes
person,
now? Are monkeys slaves?
Yes.
Is this happening?
What one person does make a difference. And I think being part of a priesthood does solidify that for me.
I agree with
that a word I speak or an action I take does make a difference. And I don't think I would have had that if it hadn't been.
I agree. We actually have a question from Christopher.
Hi, Christopher.
Hi. How's it going? How does your initiated path improve your day-to-day life, say mundane jobs or relationships?
Well,
or does it?
Or
I
does
feel like
it?
it's a two-part question. Does it? And if
Does
so,
it?
how?
Well, I'm going to start with just saying that I don't know. Because the reality of the
don't have a
situation
mundane
is...
life.
Well, it's not
You don't know
just
how it would have
that.
looked
I
otherwise.
don't, though.
I think how it probably helps. Well, it's also very hard because you have to understand that my husband decided to make the foolish decision of becoming a priest. So that complicates things now because, it's weird, because I've got to have this sort of dual thing with him, and I don't always treat him fair because he's my husband in my mind first. And I have to remind myself to put on my priest hat in certain conversations. And I'm sure it's duplicitous on any means. But I think
Intentional
that...
schizophrenia.
Yes. Yes.
Now I'm going to be this person.
Well, no, I'm that way anyway. It's my Virgo rising. That's where my sociopath
Same.
comes in. I can
Virgo
literally be
rising.
like, I'm a priest now. But I've learned over years that does not translate to everyone else, So in my personal life, it only helps me because I think craft has helped make me a better person. And like Rosie started this whole conversation out with tonight, I 100% believe that the only moral ethic in craft is intention. And I think the biggest lesson is that you are personally responsible for everything. And so that probably helps me out in, all of my life, I take full responsibility. I don't think the devil's making me do it. I don't think that it's, my choices are because of someone else or because of an ancestor or because, I'm gay or whatever it is. I'm completely in control of my life. And so I think that probably helps me navigate some things in more of a positive manner. But, we're human beings, kind of. So, well, there's still some of the DNA.
The audience is
Carrie
gross.
just said gross.
Yeah, they're human gross.
Well, we look like human beings.
We're actually those reptile people that crazy British guy talks about running the world.
Not reptile people.
What about you, Levi? How is it?
Maybe a bit fairy, perhaps?
Maybe a bit fey. The word fey is a little bit better.
Let's go with that.
How does it
She,
impact?
I like she.
She, yeah, people of the
She
mountains.
folk. Bit unseelie, perhaps.
See, you never. How does it impact my mundane life?
Well, has it improved? How has it
No.
improved?
No.
I don't know because it's been going on so long and my personal life's been crap the whole time.
Here's what I'll say. It negates a lot, actually. It does make it harder.
I only hang out with witches, so I don't know.
because I spend most of my
I
time
have one
around
non-witch
that.
friend, and he's a voodoo priest.
That does not count.
That's it.
That does
All
not
my
count.
other friends are
That's
witches.
a topic for another show.
Yeah.
No.
So
No, I mean, he's
so it
great,
hasn't
but he's not
improved
exactly a normal person.
No. It has, though, in one major...
Not normal.
In one major way, it has improved my life, which is, I sound like a lunatic. You ever just hear yourself in your
He
head?
is
You're
a
like,
lunatic.
don't say this out
This is
loud.
gonna
So
be the
we're finally discovered
Where is-
self-reflection.
I think so big all the time, and I'm so in that headspace of like craft, religion, the gods.
Ego.
No, the opposite actually.
Everything I say,
You can take things in stride. Like I had a
I think so big, so perfectly big. My mind is so big, it's the
These
biggest.
things must be done delicately.
It's the biggest mind you've ever seen, and
Levi
it's
has a
perfect.
giant
It's done
brain.
perfectly.
I have-
It actually, you can't see
I'm
it
gonna
on
finish
his.
this sentence if it
Sticks out
kills
the back
you.
of his head.
Like I'm gonna finish this goddamn thought if it kills you.
Now he's swearing.
Please go.
Yes,
No.
go ahead.
Brian, stop it.
No.
Okay.
When you're in that headspace that's huge and you're talking about religion all the time or you're a priest or you're focused on the gods all the time, you do take things in stride more. Like, this is a weird 180
Bigger
turn to get
picture,
dark. I lost, I had a lot of loss in the last couple of years, and I dealt with it really well in the sense
because he killed them.
I did. But people told me
he hit the bodies.
I did.
But he felt bad later.
Not even a little. They were like, you dealt with it so well. How did you do that? Well, when people come to me with their own grief, and I'm like, well, because I don't see things as endings. The craft makes you think more cyclically. It makes your mind think of things outside of the self more. It makes you aggrandize the self in the right way, not for ego, but for like life is meaningful. And so. That is the way it improves my day-to-day life.
Butterfly flaps its wings.
And the world has changed, and so it makes life easier in some ways. That crazy mind of always being on fire in a way is bad, but the positive of it is bad things happen, and that's okay. Law mishappens, but so does, and then God is reborn, it's fine.
I'm going to say how it improved my day-to-day life was I ditched my shitty ex.
Congrats.
And... yeah, I'm going to go back to the empowered answer. Sorry, I had to get that in there because I can't be with these two for this long and not be a bit of a bitch.
Enjoy
it. It has to happen.
Darling,
you're
not just any bitch. You're not a basic bitch.
I'm not a basic
You're
bitch.
a royal bitch.
I'm not a basic witch. Yes.
When you say something bitchy, it's a decree. Remember.
I like that.
Yes. It's very, very nice.
It made
what is it? I don't argue, I'm explaining.
I am explaining. No, it made me less willing to put up with bullshit, I think, is probably the quickest way of... We're allowed to swear, of course we are.
We already have.
Compared to whose rules are we talking about? On the show, yes.
Yes, okay. In general, in life, it made me less of a doormat / pushover. And I think part of that comes from working, as a priestess of... the god, obviously, but as the goddess, when you're being invoked on, you're taking on some of that residual goddess power, and it makes you less able, not just willing, but able to have that desecrated. So I think that's a really important part of craft and of any religion that reveres a goddess form, that actually you're sanctifying the female divine.
I love that, and that's why you should write that book I plugged in your ear years ago, because I think that people need to understand that the craft, I believe the craft is a balanced thing, but in the world that we have today, it is so empowering to the feminine, but in a natural way, not in an extreme way, not in a, I must now be the complete opposition, but in owning your own space. And I loved that. That was so eloquently put, what you just said there.
Val says she's watching us.
You would not allow yourself to be desecrated.
I love you.
No, in all sorts of ways, psychologically and physically. It's that agency,
since she's watching, we've got to do this.
Oh.
To the best teacher the craft has ever had.
We love
Val
you.
Hughes, come around here, Carrie. Oh, no, we got to get Carrie in here. So we're going to raise our glass to the best teacher the craft has ever had. Both Gardnerian and Alexandrian. I don't care. It's true.
We love you.
But blessed Bay. Blessed Bay.
Tink, 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 tink.
Yes. Anyway, we're not her fault, mind you. But she's makes a really good.
I'm your fault.
Address all complaints too.
I will never make you own me. I wouldn't do that to you. I love you too much.
No, she threw wine on you last time you asked her to do that.
That's true.
Poor spilled it on me.
She consecrated you. Choosing priesthood. So Joanne's asking, choosing priesthood must take the energy to a whole new level as far as working. How has it changed you on this level?
Right, one more time.
Answer that choosing priesthood must take the energy to a whole new level as far as working. How has it changed you on this level?
Yes, you start.
I'd like to answer that. My favourite analogy, because I came up with it, on that is relates to musicians. So you could have a solo musician who plays guitar and sings, who can captivate a room, and for me, a solitary witch can do that. But when you have a full band with everyone playing different instruments and the interplay of energy that goes on there, I think that for me, that's how being part of initiatory craft and being part of a group where you're working with other people, it just transcends what you can possibly do on your own. And I think when you're all working with the same intent and with the same purpose, yeah, it definitely, the power is something that I don't think it's possible to achieve by yourself. And by that, I don't mean that I think people can't work magic on their own. I certainly think, I know they can. But I think working in a group, for me, was entirely transformative because it meant that the power I had was amplified by the people I was working with.
Yeah. And she doesn't know how spoiled she is because the reason why I started training with Val, I went there and Lady M, Maxine had arranged it and Val graciously guested me in. I was so impressed by I was blown away. And I tried to bring as much home as I could.
I made him clean the ashtray.
She was mean. She's mean. Rosie was so serious. I thought she was the most serious person I'd ever met.
I was actually joking, but you didn't get my British humor.
No, at the time, I think at the time your warrior was on your arm because you didn't. None of you knew me. You were extremely, very serious.
No, the Americans are coming.
Yes. No, Val says that. People said it like it was a disease. The Americans are coming. No, it was fabulous. That impressed upon me what I saw there, which is the reason why Maxine sent me, was that I could see good Alexandrian training. That was the reason. It's what makes her fabulous. So I could see, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, I must be part of this. And the rest is history.
But you were really humble as well. That was something I remember being really impressed
because I was blown away.
Which now that I know you, I find bizarre.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yes.
It's possible.
Surreal.
I have to say.
No, you were such an open and...
Because my spiritual quest in craft is that. Owning my own space or authority is a different beast entirely.
But you were a true student. You came in the
Still
spirit of, I want to learn. And because I was a first degree priestess at that point. And
I'm humble as a student and I'm humble as a priest. I'm not humble as a person.
But you were a high priest. And I remember you, because you were already a high priest at that point, and I remember you coming... I remember you coming to the group and...
Jesus, right. Take the buttons from him.
I didn't know which one I was going for.
He's just embarrassed because I'm praising him.
Well, no, the rally situation is, and I appreciate it.
Take a drink.
I still think I feel that way.
I think it's important.
But the world that I'm in, with the sort of politics and things that come up, you do start to get a thick skin and you do start to develop a sort of...
But as far as your pursuit of magical knowledge and craft, I think that one of your great strengths is that... Sorry, this is going to be like, oh, we love Brian's show. But for anybody... I know.
You've been making fun of me plenty.
He's my dad and brother and...
It's
some kind of level. I don't know, it's very strange.
And she helps train me. It's weird.
It's very West Virginia.
I don't know what that means, but I agree.
I love that. She's British.
I'm from Wales, so if
no,
it's human, it's a bonus. Sorry, Welsh people.
All one of you that are watching. Croeso.
Sorry, Val.
She likes me because she's part Viking.
Croeso.
I am part Viking, but short. No, I think that that spirit of genuine pursuit of knowledge and true desire to learn and lack of arrogance, because I think if there's arrogance involved, then it's I already know this, or there's a fear of asking something. And I think something that always impressed me about Brian.
I just asked you something recently.
My God.
But that's what I mean.
At one point, one of them's going to start singing that song from Beaches.
I don't know.
I'm so humble. Levi says I'm humble like a Borgia Pope.
You can't call yourself humble.
Yeah.
You can't call yourself humble.
That's what he says.
He's humble like Alexander VI was humble.
He's
when he
like,
had to wear that one thing.
Look at me in my sad little robes.
That's like calling yourself woke, though, isn't it? Like, you can't call yourself woke.
You don't get to choose.
No. I don't think I'm only humble in the presence of magnificence.
Wow.
And
that was me.
Val was magnificent. Your coven was magnificent.
Shout out to
our gods are magnificent. Our tradition is magnificent. So I'm humble in the face of something greater than myself, Which
all three of those things.
happens
So
to
when
be
Brian
very few
stops
things.
being humble to you, you know
And
that's
you
because
know
he
he
thinks
thinks
he's
you-
better than you.
Can I just
Oh.
say, the Britishness that's coming from her reminds me of this thing Jim Gaffigan says, where he goes, why do the British always treat Americans like you just walked into their jewelry store with 2 fresh bags of trash? And they're just like, may we help you?
Yeah. British sarcasm is something that takes
Yeah.
a while to,
Oh, I love it. I might be part. So are you, really.
We're
Levi and
You're
I.
all adoptive.
Yes, we are.
We're Americans. we're
Honorary,
Anglo-Saxons.
you're
No.
honorary British.
You're not having. Would you please talk to us in an Appalachian accent?
Nope.
You
I
got
have
Edward
one.
to-
Don't
This
make
is
him.
one.
That's mean.
No, you used to have one though.
No, this is one. This
Yeah,
is
but
I have
there's a
Southern
there's a
accent.
pre-educated Levi.
Brian has a British
No, there's
accent,
not.
which is weird.
Brian does not have a British
Brian,
accent.
well, not to British people,
No.
to American people.
No, one person did say, we said that. I said that online here, and somebody said, you actually sound like my friend from Manchester. And Levi said, don't tell him that.
No, don't feed this.
No one from Manchester I've ever heard.
Because
sounds like you,
what I do get, because it happens when I'm drinking or doing rituals or being around people that are from there,
So a lot.
a lot. It's a tinge, though, isn't it? It's just this
Not
little...
of Manchester.
No, I don't think
That's
so
like,
either.
ah.
I think it's more London sounding, maybe.
No.
Is it more Welsh sounding? Cause
No.
No, I don't know what it
You just
is.
think it's completely made
It's
up.
a hybrid.
It's Madonna when she was. I don't mean
Yeah.
that mean. I don't mean that mean. Because you. No, not a read. Not
Magical
a read.
Right.
accent.
Sorry, Levi's done now. He's no longer a member.
He's moving away his own mic. Like it's gonna silence.
My
me.
accent is perfect. It's the most perfect accent you've ever heard.
is
It's perfectly
perfect.
good.
It's a
No
perfect
one's
Brian
ever said
accent.
my accent was bad. Everyone loved it. You guys are getting the Trump jokes, right?
What?
You're getting the Trump jokes, right?
Oh
am.
no, I just did that.
I
oh,
did,
you
I
did.
did.
Oh no, because Trump is saying everything's perfect.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's the
I have
perfect
the
phone
most
The best
call.
accent that's ever
I have
been.
the best words.
I have the best words. My words are perfect.
Sorry, I'm making Trump jokes tonight. If you didn't read into that.
We
And
should
in,
ask
and in
questions.
Britain, Trump means fart.
Wow.
This is like 3 siblings getting together and getting drunk
So I'm
on
so sorry.
wine.
I'm not
sorry.
Weird inbred siblings, though, a little bit.
We should put our
Isn't it?
caps on. You know.
What?
Okay, questions.
What hats?
Our priest
There are no
hat.
hats in our religion.
Well, you know, the priest hat. Metaphorical, you know.
The mitre, like the
Yes.
bishops wear. Yeah.
Anyway, do we have any questions? If you have any questions.
Everybody's left because of us.
No, they didn't.
Sorry.
I'm kidding.
504 321
We're having fun.
Now, ask a question. 504 321
Oh, thank you, Carrie. No more
3472.
doormat. You're right. Yeah, no more being a
Yes,
doormat.
yeah, don't be a doormat.
Refuse.
Never
So
could.
okay,
Be mini doormats.
you said
Happening.
I don't know.
Probably something we're all going to feel bad about tomorrow.
no, honey.
No
I'm
regrets.
fine.
I have
I've
no
had
regrets.
2 sips.
You ready?
I'm fine too. I'm giddy.
We'll call it that.
Okay,
No, I'm
let's go with
giddy.
that.
No, I am.
Okay.
I'm
Do you have a
giddy.
question?
No.
That's British. No, thank you. Thank you, but no.
I did earlier and then I forgot about it.
Okay, you said in the beginning of the show, and this is something I say a lot too, which is I identify more as a priest than a witch.
Yes.
No, I
I
didn't mean
do
drink
too.
it. I
Yes.
meant put more in it.
Or an initiate. That's something I
Yes.
identify with.
Oh, you want me to
However-
finish it off? Oh, hold on. Sorry.
Brian's kryptonite. There's some left. You must finish it.
No, she was trying to get me to not mix my wine.
I
I
said-
didn't understand.
mix wine.
Carrie has been being our wine bearer tonight, so if Levi's extremely drunk, it's
I was
her fault.
wondering what word was
Literally
going to come out. So
sober
I'm
as a
glad it was
judge.
fairer.
Sorry,
Carrie.
Yes.
drink a lot.
Priestess or high priestess now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Is some I know is something I identify as more than witch. However, we were having a conversation a few days ago, I believe, about our own definitions of witch, and I think that I'm not. I mean, I'm an English witch for one thing, but also a rural English witch, which I think is slightly different.
Being a Londoner.
I'm not a Londoner. Love
I
London.
wish I was a
Love
Londoner.
London.
I'd be such a great Londoner.
I think it meant I was sheltered from some of the wider witch world for a while, which I'm really grateful for because I think it allowed me to develop my craft in an organic way.
We need the Game of Thrones button on here.
Du- 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 du-
Yes, no, seriously.
Which house would I be?
Yeah.
One of the ones no one's heard of.
You'd be in the one with that little girl that cut people's throats.
Yes, I would.
Stark, right?
No, Mormont. The little tiny girl that was like, you disrespected the cold.
No. Well, that would be you. But
Arya Stark is the one.
I was thinking of Arya, but no, she would be that little girl that was leading it.
You refuse the call.
Yes, no, that would be you.
As it says on Game of
remember.
Thrones, just
You know which ones I
disrespecting the phone tree.
We all know who I would be.
We have a question from Val, not to interrupt you.
Oh, yes.
No,
Look how excited they got.
as well.
Do you think the BTW traditions will survive or just become one generic nonsense?
Oh, I'm going to start that,
Can it be both?
Hateful.
I think it's actually that should parlay another question that I have in mind about what we as a generation think we should be doing with this wonderful thing that's been given to us. I think it will survive because I think the craft will survive, and I think it is the craft. Will it be consistent all the time? I don't think it is now. I think it's always been, if you look at Gardner's work and Alex's work and the different people involved in that, it's, every lineage, every coven, there's been variances, we've got tons in common, tons of similarities. As far as the, how the craft is interpreted in the broader world, I think eternity is a bunch of nonsense, but it does encourage magic, and it encourages thinking outside the box, and so I think that's wonderful. But I think that the true craft will always reincarnate, whether it does it in our lifetimes or not. I do not think Gardnerian or Alexandrian witchcraft is in danger of dying in lineage anytime soon. I do get concerned sometimes about certain lineages training dying, and I feel a responsibility for that, especially yours, Val. I think your training is very good, and I feel a responsibility to try my best to pass that on, because I don't want to see that quality to disappear in the world. Yeah. But it will in some way, but perhaps it can reincarnate. I don't know. But no, I think what we're doing is something that's going to go on for some time. If it finally dies before people do, I think it will reincarnate.
Yes.
I think I'm going to do a annoying linguist thing now and say that I think it depends how you define survive, because I think that all religions are reflections of the cultures that they spring from. So if it's going to survive, it needs to organically change with the needs of the adapt with the needs of the culture that's using it. So yeah, I think it will survive. I think it has survived several generations already. But yeah, I think if it's going to continue, then it does need to embrace change to an extent and evolve alongside that, and not. I think as soon as you try and keep something the same, then it's going to. I can just hear Christian in the background. It's going to stagnate. So I think it's important to keep feeding into its new growth and, not try and trap it, try and allow it to wander free and evolve.
Can I disagree with one thing?
You can disagree with whatever.
If you look at any other religious tradition,
careful.
the opposite of that is kind of true, though. Like, the liberal Christians are dying. The conservative ones are surviving. The same
but is that not going back? Is that still not reflecting?
Yes, it's a form of evolution, but like traditional Catholicism, for example, is thriving in the world. Liberal Catholic churches are dead, like they're dying.
So we need to be more strict.
Yes, not strict as in morally strict, but strict in the sense of like there is a closed door, this is a mystery, you have to work to achieve it. It is not easy, it is not free, it is not for everyone, and that's okay. But to answer Val's question, do I think it's going to die? All I can say with authority is not in my lifetime.
Oh, good man.
Like, not in my lifetime.
Or maybe several future ones.
Yes. Yeah. But I also will say, I have peace in my heart that even if it did, it doesn't actually break my heart, because the mysteries will never die. We went to Eleusis. I've stood in, the temple of Isis of Philae, the temple of Karnak, the temple of Luxor. Like, I've been in a few pretty Stonehenge. The mysteries are eternal. They are
and we
not
are connected
going
to
anywhere,
all of
and we
them.
are the mysteries. So if my specific mirror of the mysteries dies, I will weep for that, but I will not weep grandly because they're never going anywhere. They never have died. They never will. So
They just evolve.
You know, to piggyback on this question, because it was something that you asked earlier that I did want to say, I had an encounter. I have this feeling, maybe it's in my imagination, I have this feeling I've been encountering a new breed of magical people. And maybe it's just a product of my own existence, you know, I don't know, a reflection of my own existence. I was thinking about the show tonight, and I was thinking, well, what does it mean to be priesthood? You know, and usually in the craft, you know, we're priesthood within our own cloistered groups. We're not priesthood in the world. And I used to translate that into, you know, we're priests of the gods, we're priests of the work. You know, we don't have a laity.
yeah, we don't have a laity.
But I've recently been encountering that we sort of are starting to establish one. And this was going on while I was writing my book. If someone regards you as a priest or a priestess, you are one to them.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had a few non-initiates who have vocalized that, and that's very new to me, considering I've been public for a while now. And not in a sycophantic way, but just like I recognize that there's a difference between the religion of witchcraft and being a priest in witchcraft. And I follow the religion of witchcraft. I may never want to get initiated, but I still am trying to worship your gods, and I still believe in magic, and I still love the Sabbats, and I still love all these things. But I respect that you've chosen to dedicate your life to this, and I consider you a priest, whether I ask them to or not. And in that very moment, I realize there's a bit of a responsibility that if someone, I mean, it's not an obligation, but there's a bit of a responsibility that if they perceive you as a priest to them, you are. You know, and we're doing that here in the show tonight. We're representing our craft. You know, we're having fun. The show's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be serious. But, you know, we are representing the craft as a priesthood, and that's what we're talking about
I think
tonight.
feeding off that point as well, I have, I mean, most of my friends know that I'm a witch. It sort of explains things rather than poses more questions, really. Like, oh, well, that all makes sense now.
Valid.
But but I love the fact that you know, my house is somewhere that when people are feeling upset or have questions, they come there, you know, we'll talk. I'm not saying that I have like pearls of wisdom to offer, but
You do.
I revel in having a space. I revel in having a space, you know, that I have made sacred, and that people who aren't initiates can come to and feel, I don't like using the word safe for that, but feel unburdened. You know, they can talk about whatever's on their mind and go away feeling better. For whatever reason. It may not be advice I've given, it might just be because I've set that space up as being...
Is that me?
Yes.
Yes.
From that?
As being
sorry.
somewhere
Set my phone down.
healing. And I think, yeah, even people who don't know that I'm initiated or don't know that I'm a high priestess or don't, you know, or don't know what that means, like they might know that about me but not really understand the ramifications of that, but they'll...
Yes.
And so I think there is a level of working as priesthood. You know, when you think about, you know, the Christian priesthood, you think of people who, shying away from the controversy, you think of people who you can go to for advice and who will help you navigate your life,
Yes.
because that's their job. And I enjoy that aspect of something I consider to be my job. You know, I'm a high priestess because I am willing to give my energy towards guiding people.
Can I piggyback a question for you? This is a newer experience for me. I mean, I've always had people in my life who looked at me as a witch, but it's a new experience for me to find Americans looking to our initiatory priesthood as their priesthood.
Yeah.
Is that not new in England?
I can't speak for England at large, but I certainly think that over the last few years we've had a lot of requests from people for hand fastings and things like that, where they want something that's not Christianity or established religion. You know, they want.
I suppose let me
celebrate.
paraphrase that. Do you think that the priesthood in Britain might be a little bit more well received in the general public than it might be here? I know it's a complicated question.
Sure, I think I can only speak from my experience. I think that, you know, paganism, which I know has different connotations for you guys here, but I think, you know, in Britain, paganism is something that is generally accepted to be a valid religion. You know, people hug trees, it's fine. You know, it's a thing. We've made it. I mean, all kind of most religion is seen as a bit of an eccentricity where I'm from, I think. So it doesn't really matter what
Human
it is.
secularism.
But I certainly think that more people are gravitating towards those earth-based religions where it's not. It's about being in contact with natural forces rather than about being in a big cold building with somebody preaching at you. And the main comments that I've had from doing hand fastings for people is that it felt personal, it felt individual, it felt like something that was tailored for them rather than something that was part of a faceless, humanless kind of void, you know. And I think I've noticed that going to church ceremonies since being initiated, that it feels very cold and very detached. And I think that being part of a religion that considers itself responsible for the wider community, I mean, it obviously is quite a, you know, you have power in that sense, but you also have a responsibility to give something back. You know, doing green burials is something we've done before, and I think that's probably the time. Green burials.
What is that?
So it's a funeral, but it's conducted outside. It's people who are being buried in a completely biodegradable way.
Right.
Yeah, we have them here.
And conducting those, I think, is where that comes through the strongest.
I
where you
want
feel
to
like
put in a pyramid, and Christian keeps saying no.
But I think that's where you really feel that responsibility, where, you know, this is not fun. This is not something that I'm doing for my ego or some. It's a responsibility. It's a duty to perform for people who need help with something.
Yes.
And, you know, doing that
priest.
for families. A priest.
You're a priest.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the whole concept. We've gotten behind on a few questions.
Sorry.
Let's do the questions.
One of them was...
you were being fabulous, that's why.
It's true. So, Lida Diana asked me one in particular. She said that I had stated on a
Love
previous...
the name.
Yes. That I had stated on a previous show that witchcraft is a phenomenon that really happens in the Christian West. So if Christianity dies off, would witchcraft return to something like Eleusis? Would it just become pagan again?
We hope so.
Not
possibly
possible.
not.
Christianity.
I mean, we wish, but no, can't.
Christianity is, even if the belief dies, it's a Christian culture, period. I lived in France for a long time. It's one of the most atheistic places on earth. It's still a Christian
Once
culture.
you've injected a body, it's been injected.
Also, I have very different experiences of Christianity than these two. And we've talked about this before too. I actually feel the mysteries in most Catholic services and Orthodox services and really well done Anglican Evangelsong, for example. Like, I find God and my goddess even in those religions. So that's my own weird thing. But Seth...
Well, because you were raised Catholic, we were...
No, I converted to Catholicism.
In Protestant environment.
My culture is Protestant, though. My parents are Protestants. I was a convert.
Church of England.
But Seth asked, do you feel...
Church of white trash here.
Wow.
Church of a guy who just wanted to get divorced.
Well, remember the poet who calls it the Church of England, the sweet mediocrity of our native church.
Cake or death.
Seth says, do you feel that witches flip between the role of witch and priestess, and somebody might be drawn more to one than the
Depends
other?
what you mean by witch.
Well, what he's saying is within our path, do you feel some people are better at one role than the other?
Well, okay. So do you
I don't
mind
think
if I
are admitted
take
who
that
can't
reins?
perform both roles.
If you're talking about our craft, talking about initiatory craft, because, you know, a lot of people use the word witch now and they mean different things by it. If you're talking about initiatory craft, our priesthood is a magical priesthood. You know, if you went back to ancient Egypt and you were a priest or priestess of the Temple of Isis, those priests and priestesses were magicians. They were healers. That was part of how they were trained.
The Druids.
There was no separation.
Yes, the Druids, the same thing. So no, in our craft, every priest or priestess is exposed to every talent. Are some perhaps more gifted than others? Of course, yes, of course they are. But they're all trained equally, you know. So no, what you're perhaps wondering is there a difference between, you know, the idea of a witch being a magician or a magical person and a priest who is a servant. And perhaps that's something we should, what does being a priestess or a priest mean to us? Maybe we should ask that question. To me, witchcraft or, whatever you want to call my religion, it's a magical religion. Magic is part of our belief system. So I don't see how it could ever be separated.
It can't. And unknitting magic, and like there are entire scholarly books written on trying to unknit the concept of prayer versus magic. Like, historically, what was the difference? Why did they separate the two? Which cultures did? Which cultures didn't? How did they do it? There is no solid answer. And
I have one. Responsibility. Comes back to what she said in the beginning. If you're working magic, you're responsible for that. You're responsible for everything, and you're the one making it happen.
But that, again, make me an instrument of thy peace, O Lord. Like, I mean, it literally exists in prayer too.
Sure, but
like,
I think
in
we were
Catholicism,
talking about choice.
So.
Yes.
But we were talking about choice a little bit before, and I think that one of the
you still were giving it to Jesus, like you did this.
One of the things that I give the most gravity to as a priest and a witch is that if somebody asks me to work magic on their behalf, I think really long and hard about whether I should. It's not just, oh, well, this person's asked for a spell, so yeah, of course I'll do it. We don't take money for magical work, which I think is a really important and intrinsic thing, because it means that if we do work for somebody, we're not influenced by, are we going to make some money though, because I'm really broke, which I think is important, but also...
Or we shouldn't.
We shouldn't. Well, we don't. If anyone ever asks you for money for magical work, don't get them to do it. Not tarot, yeah, anyway, that's a whole other subject. That's a whole different thing. But I think that, I certainly feel responsible for every piece of magic I've worked for anybody. And for me, I guess if I had to come up with a reason why maybe the word witch would be differentiated from the word initiate, that would maybe be it. Because I think as a witch, you can work whatever you want for whoever you want. And as priesthood, I think we're called to account more because we're taught to be more aware and responsible for the things that we choose to do.
Yes.
As part of our tradition.
I have a weird, and I'm not going to derail.
Also, hi Beth, love you.
Yes, blessed
Beth, we love you.
Blessed be Patrick. Blessed be Patrick.
Patrick, yes.
Benvenuto.
Thank you all for watching. We adore you all.
We adore you all. I'm not going to derail the show for this because it could be a whole show, but I have a knee-jerk reaction against this sort of like denigration of Christianity and other major religions as this cheap sort of like that you all must have been experiencing like really shitty evangelical Christianity. Like true Christian theology is very Neoplatonic, very Aristotelian. Like, I mean, they do not believe.
I think that you're underestimating the fact that Catholicism has that ingrained in it.
Yes.
And you're very smart. So,
well, God bless you. But
I don't think that that's the average Catholic experience.
But I don't think that the average witch or initiate even necessarily owns up to that full responsibility all the time either.
No.
But initiate.
But the difference is you're not around average initiates.
No, I'm not. I'm not around average religious
You
people.
are right.
See, Brian, stop being humble right now.
I'm not around average religious people.
This is the Brian we know and love.
Even when I was a Catholic, I hung around Dominicans. You know what I mean?
Somebody
I get it.
asked an interesting question before, and I'm trying to find it.
You
Thoughts on Aleister Crowley?
Thoughts on Aleister Crowley?
Well.
And it's 8:20 already, so be brief.
We've got time.
I've only very recently started reading any Aleister Crowley, and I'm finding it very interesting. I have not much of value to say about it because it's very new to me. I think that he has some incredible insights to offer, and that I'm extremely I've lost the word. Sorry, I can like half hear.
I know.
I was whispering.
No, you don't know. Oh, it's fine.
I was really surprised by how much he had influenced craft because my training was pure craft. I've been initiated for 10 years now. So my training was pure craft for a while, and since I took my 3rd degree initiation, I've been exploring more of the wider occult world and expanding on that because I think as a teacher that's something I have a responsibility to do. And I was really surprised by how much of our liturgy and just general ideas. I'm not saying some of it was directly from Crowley and some of it was indirectly from Crowley, but I'm very interested in how that was developed because it has been built on, I think some of those ideas.
Levi has something to say.
No, I do. But I'm waiting. It's fine.
Some of those ideas don't translate directly into craft. The misogyny. But I think that there's quite a lot that does. And yeah, I was really surprised by that, but also intrigued by it. And it's made me want to read more.
Wow.
I started reading the Book of Lies.
I think it's actually, I think any occultist, modern occultist, should probably familiarize themselves with the works of Aleister Crowley. However, I would suggest not going down the same rabbit hole he did. That's, from
Several rabbit holes.
my work.
Yes.
The connection to Aleister Crowley and craft is literally just poetry. Gerald Gardiner was connected to the OTO. He didn't embrace it. He didn't follow through with it. He could have. He could have remained a member of the OTO, but he did not. He did his work in craft. I talk about it in my book, as far as like certain things that may have come from certain places and how they have been adapted. Maxine has a line. I'm assuming it's her line. It could have been someone else's, but I've stolen it. It's my line now. But I'm going to give her credit with it because that's the person I got it from. Is that witchcraft is a scavenger religion. We'll steal everyone's best bits. I believe personally, from having studied, I don't think Aleister Crowley's philosophy enters into craft at all. I think his poetry does. However, there is absolutely a connection. There's no doubt about it. Gerald Gardiner had met him, so had Patricia Crowther, and in fact, Arnold Crowther, Patricia's husband, was very close to Aleister Crowley. Very close.
How close?
Well, I don't know. One must wonder. Aleister Crowley was obviously a very well-known, bisexual, sexual creature, and it was quite obvious that Arnold Crowther had known Aleister Crowley before he was married to Patricia. Yeah. So, there is a connection with craft, absolutely. There's no doubt there's not. And as an occultist, you've got to give him credit. He's got a lot of work. I do not think, based on my research, that his actual philosophies entered in. I think that we pinched poetry. I don't. But you'd have to speak specifically about it for me to address it.
Love and
and it harm none, do what you will, for instance.
Striving towards your highest ideal.
That's poetry.
But that's also a philosophy.
You're right there.
The intent behind it.
Okay, let me rephrase that then. There are some philosophies of his that align with ours, but I don't think that his overall hypothesis is craft.
That's fair.
Does that make better sense?
Yeah.
Yes, he's an ecstatic more than a fertility religion.
Yes,
There's a big
there are
difference.
certain things we agree with. I think the OTO is sort of a hybrid between ceremonial magicians and the craft, but in its own weird way.
And it's also not a religion. The OTO is a...
Thelema is.
Thelema is a religion, but the OTO is just an order. We could be members of the OTO.
Yeah, but it's now the same thing,
But and they have the ecclesia too. They have their own church, their own bishops. I think...
I'm not anti by any means.
I know you're not.
I think that the contribution... Now, there is that whole theory that Aleister Crowley was involved in the craft, which who freaking knows? It's usually discredited.
Again, it goes back to definitions.
Yeah, discredited.
Define
what do you mean by that?
There are articles that say he was actually working with priestesses and he left the craft because he didn't want to be bossed around by women. Most people nowadays...
Don't believe that.
This stretch
I'm just looking at Carrie because we're like...
Sybil Leek claims that he knew her parents, and that they had a childhood thing,
I like her, but she claimed a lot of things.
Well, of course she did. But the point is there's a huge mythology. What we know for a fact is that the craft did use his poetry in certain elements. It affected the charge of the goddess through the Gnostic Mass.
some of it was developed, wasn't it, by Doreen Valiente?
Yes. Well, she took a lot of Crowley material out. That was her.
Yeah, Gerald wrote the first version.
But some of it was kind of evolved again. I keep using that word.
First Gardnerian charge of the goddess is very Gnostic Mass. And Doreen fixed that up a bit. it was clear that Gardiner used Aleister Crowley and not Llewellyn, but Charles Leland's work. Sorry, it took me a minute, and piggybacked off that. Right, a lot of poetry's come out of it. You know.
I think here's the thing. Crowley, I don't think it goes beyond craft. Crowley is massively influential on all modern Western occultism, period. But here's what's important to remember. I kind of agree with you both in the sense that I actually think we did borrow a lot from Crowley philosophically. Yeah. But I think what Brian's saying maybe...
Well, I had to correct myself on
what I think you're saying more is...
He didn't create craft.
We borrowed from the liturgy because that's really...
was available.
Like Crowley and the fathers of the fathers of the
It
Hermetic...
was there. Sounded good.
The fathers of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, like Mathers and whatnot. We honor them now because that's all we had at the moment. They were the only people who had translations of the grimoires. They were the only people writing about this stuff. Now we don't.
Some of it was beautiful.
And it was beautiful.
But
now
taking beautiful things.
I think he was a fantastic poet and magician.
We can read all those things in the native languages. We have much more access to material now. So now we've used Aleister Crowley and other people like that to build a functional liturgy or a functional scaffold. But the magic, the philosophy, and the religion is much older. So what we take from Crowley is a scaffold. What we don't take from him
is our gods.
And also, he's not our prophet. I don't believe that Crowley met Horus in Egypt.
Also, this is a discussion I was actually having with someone earlier this week. Everything, if you trace it back far enough, we're all working from the same universal occult principles. So while you can take wording, specific poetry wording for ritual, essentially if everybody's working to the same truths, then they should come across the same concepts in the first.
And that does
becoming the mini. That's not Crowley. That's literally an ancient Platonic concept.
Right?
Yeah.
But she is right. It does happen. And I speak about that in my book. The fact that there's this
convergence.
Yeah.
Convergence. It happened in the ancient world and is still happening today.
But I think the big difference between the things I've read of Crowley, which is limited, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the things that I've read of Crowley and the difference between that and craft is a real reverence for the divine feminine, as opposed to it's expedient to court that as an idea. We can use femininity to do X, Y, Z. Whereas in craft, it's very much about accepting and loving.
Craft is a fertility cult. Thelema is a sexual cult.
Ecstasy versus fertility.
I
mean, that would be the way I would express it.
They would disagree with that, of course, but I think
in the old, not now necessarily, but when.
No, there's truth in what you're saying. There's a difference between an ecstasy religion and a fertility religion.
Yeah.
And I think that's true, but also I also think it's really important to keep stressing here. The OTO is an order. I could be a member of it and a craft priest, and there's not really a conflict.
There are similarities.
To be a Thelemite in the AA is a whole different game.
Yeah.
So the OTO and the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica and Thelema and AA, those are all different things, really. They're all stemming from Crowley, but they're complicated. The OTO existed before him. The AA and things like that are, they're their own things.
After him, though. That's the whole thing.
Yes, it's complicated, right? But here's the other thing that I think.
If it was a Facebook status, it would be it's complicated.
Yes, but I also think what I like is that you're admitting, whole pieces of the liturgy, and we all are kind of saying, and?
I think we can all agree we admire Aleister Crowley, but he didn't represent craft.
Religiously.
That's all we're saying.
He's not a priest.
He probably agree with that too.
Yes, he was a magician. And he promoted. I do think he promoted pagan ideals. To use that word.
And I don't think his contribution should be understated or ignored.
How can it be?
Because I think, like you said earlier, all of modern occult practice is
we've pinched all of his best hits.
But as someone I spoke to earlier in the week said to me, he also pinched things from earlier things too.
Yeah.
So
we all do.
Where's the harm?
It's been happening the whole time.
It's British colonialism at work, right? It's like
take the good things.
Take some of
but I do think admitting that big pieces of the liturgy or whatever come from him is no problem to me. I like Crowley.
No.
I think Crowley was a very talented
Theopod.
magician and a very talented poet, and I think he, is problematic as many occultists were. Perhaps one of the most notorious problematic occultists in our modern history. I'm not a follower of his, but I admire him. You know?
And he did definitely contributed to Crowley. I think in philosophy as well as poetry, in some respects.
I didn't mean that
No,
to sound how it first did. What I meant by that is I don't think he impacted our current functional belief system in a relevant way.
Religion, yeah.
I think that in the sense that like some of his ideas have influenced, absolutely, particularly in Alexandrian, because
some profoundly.
Alexandrians are very, in Gardnerian, he literally affected Gerald Gardner and the liturgy of the
One of my
craft.
favourite lines from The Charge of the Goddess is a Crowley line, and I remember reading it and going,
oh,
The Blessing of the Cakes is literally
a lot of it's fantastic.
You have to watch it. It's Crowley.
I'm not going to quote it, even though it's been published online. I still don't want to.
We're definitely not Crowley haters.
Not at all.
I mean, I do recognize how things ended.
His relationships with women were troubling.
His relationships with men were
So was
troubling.
Alex's, though.
His relationship with hookers were troubling.
Well, they're women too.
On that note, it's been a minute.
It's been a minute. So we've got only about 30 minutes. So if you've got any questions,
Please ask questions.
Call in at 504-321-3472.
Blessed be Beth. I miss you lots too, beautiful lady.
Rosie is, she's going to become the Queen of Babylon here in New Orleans.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
It's fine.
Just say yes. Just fine.
I don't want to, because I don't know what it means. I know enough not to just blindly agree to things, especially if they come out in bright.
She's on to me. Anyway, I'd make a great Thelemite, isn't that what they say? Sorry, too bad.
You know what? Wrapping up tonight, I would like to say, Priesthood, what a thought.
All right, questions. Let's do a couple more.
I think we're winding down. Do you have any questions, dear?
Do I? No.
Well, when the magic leaves.
So, I've got a question.
Yes.
Go away.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So, all right. Carrie, think of a question.
Yeah, Carrie.
So,
Are there any specifically priestess questions?
what do you
like
think your responsibility is as a priest or priestess? What are you obligated to do? What are your obligations?
To the woods every night at midnight, recite the Lord's Prayer backwards. We've been over this many times.
What's my responsibility? To filter my understanding, limited or expansive as it may be, into wider community and try and spread light. That's my responsibility. That might be a horribly arrogant thing to think, though. Maybe I'm not.
I feel like we're going to have like episode 3 and there's going to be like the Sith, it's like the light and the darkness.
You're not
going
wrong.
on here. Yeah, absolutely.
My responsibility as a priest is twofold. As a high priest, my responsibility is to teach.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Like my responsibility
That's
is to
spreading
teach.
light.
Yeah, it's spreading light.
Yeah.
My responsibility is to teach something that I have had revealed to me, or that is shown to me that there can be a higher purpose. There can be something
including
beautiful.
Showing people what not to do.
Yeah,
Don't be.
I've had experiences that have been transcendental.
Oh, we've got a call.
A video call.
Well, try it out. I don't know.
Ready?
No.
I didn't know we could do video calls.
Hi, welcome to Hex.
Hi.
Hex, welcome to
Well, we're
Covendom.
literally
Hello.
in Hex.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Alex Phillips, and I have a question for you.
Sure.
All right,
Brilliant.
ask
Hi,
Alex.
Alex.
All right. So you're all public members of the priesthood. What has been the hardest part about being public members?
Public members of the priesthood.
Having
You
to
first.
speak to these guys on camera.
Wow, hateful.
The hardest part of being a public member of the priesthood is dealing with the public. Cop out. I think it really is about the fact that you are trying to express something that can only be experienced. And that in the general, dare I say, pagan community, which I hate using that word, but it is the word we're all accustomed to, the priesthood is really not valued. And the narrative about priesthood is that it's unnecessary. Initiation is unnecessary. They're all elitist. They're all arrogant. It's something that a bunch of perverts did back in the 50s and 60s. And, it's really devalued.
Where's the lie?
There really isn't a huge community in the public. So you're stepping out on a platform that we created in the first place. Because let's call a spade a spade. The Gardnerians created the first public platform that was talking about any of this. And that carried on for a while until a man named Alexandros came along. And, then the Alexandrians sort of took the baton and kept it. And, now we've got this huge pagan universe with all these different people and all these different ideas. And so when you're a priest and you're coming out, you're still speaking from that same narrative that began, and you're still saying the same things. And sometimes it's sort of problematic to realize that it's strange or surprise to most people. I have met many people who say they're witches or Wiccans, and which I'm not fond of that word, but I've found many people who say they're witches or Wiccans who don't know who Gerald Gardner or Alexanders even are. They've got no concept of how this thing became rolling. They've got no concept. So I think the challenge is navigating all of the craziness. We are a religion that functions in autonomy, and we do not have a Vatican. We do not have, which I love. I think that's
a good thing.
The best gift that we were ever given by our elders, and I think it's the reason why we have survived and will survive, is that no one can really pin you down. Everything is about the coven. As a tradition, it's broader, of course, but that's just about a bunch of covens talking about what they're representing. It's not about a person, and of course, in the court of public opinion, it's who has more people listening.
Yeah.
So, all of this comes into being. So I don't know if that answers your question, but for me, I think the difficulty is navigating this world where there's not a whole lot of education, but I feel that part of my service is to contribute to that education. And I find that people who are of any intellectual mind will find it. Because they see through it, they're like, what is it? If this is anything, what's the real thing? I find the people who want the cheese to be pre-sliced for them and made out of oil, Kraft pre-sliced cheese, they're not really caliber for any priesthood, are they?
I think building on that as well, definitely the hardest thing for me, I'm not very public when it comes to craft. It's something that's personal to me, but I think the hardest thing is being asked questions by people who don't want to hear answers. So you'll get questions about, how do I do this and how do I do that? And if you don't answer in a way that they're either anticipating or wanting you to, then it's like you get your advice thrown back in your face, and it's like, well,
they're not really asking, they're baiting.
They just
they just want to have
mainly they just want you to confirm what they already think rather than give your honest opinion. And I find that really difficult because it feels like it's wasting my time. It's like, do you want to know or do you not?
I've made a point of not doing, and I find for some strange reason it's been appreciated. I'm sure not by everyone, but I find it, even Christians, a bit shocked. Like I kind of get a little bit of the Maxine syndrome because I just say the truth.
You're a syndrome now, Maxine.
No, well, she says what she minds, and I get there's some people don't like it. I'm sure it's the same with me.
But I think to take it away from that, I think that a little different is I think that the most difficult thing for me is keeping it pure. Like, I make a lot of jokes, and I have to be sarcastic every now and then to let the air out of the room because it's so big and so important. And
to challenge your head.
That's a challenge because I don't want to do that all the time. And so being public, I have to because I can't be constantly talking about the craft in such a intense way. It's off-putting. And so balancing a more sarcastic, approachable.
Not everyone who's interested in witchcraft is ready to hear like this intense thing, and
then they're weak and they should be cast out of the fold.
Yeah. But our craft is a priesthood. It is coven based, and we do understand that there are people who just describe themselves as witches that are practicing something else, and it's perfectly fine.
But when it's the question about what's the difficult thing about being
that is the difficult thing.
I
think is the navigating what the public thinks you're even talking about. Because you're in our current society, we're dealing with a lot of feelings and a lot of politically correct, roadmaps. And my way of dealing with it is to not follow any of them. I am sensitive to how I speak most of the time, not always, but I'm sensitive to how I speak, and I try to paraphrase myself in a way that's respectful to other people's beliefs.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm just point blank about what I believe.
We have rambled to this poor gentleman.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you
your
so
question.
much for listening.
That was a really good question.
It was a
Did
very
that
good
answer your
question, though.
question?
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
you're
you.
very welcome. I do not like the little sound effect. We are going to remove that.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. Anyway, thank you,
Anyone else
caller.
have any
Yes, thank you so much.
questions? I think we have. How much time do we have?
So I think it'd be a good place now is to talk about, like, in the grand scheme, since we are talking about all these different things that people have asked about public witchcraft versus private versus being a priesthood versus just public witchcraft that is not initiatory. What is your final take on, like, what does it matter to keep that term? Why do you continue to say, yes, it's a priesthood, yes, I am a priest, this is what matters to me?
Well, for me personally, I entered into this because I got interested in witchcraft as a religion. When I got interested in witchcraft as a religion, I didn't know the word Wicca, and I didn't think of witchcraft. I mean, originally, early on, I thought of witchcraft as just spellcraft. But when I discovered Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft at the age of 15, that was when I believed it. I just read the thing and I thought, oh, okay, this explains everything I've been feeling. I believe in magic, and oh my God, there's a goddess. How fabulous is that? And I thought the god was scary because he had horns and it sounded like the devil. To me, it was raised Christian-y. So, boom, I had to decide, do I want to get involved in this? And to me, because there were good books being written at the time that I had access to, I was constantly presented by every author at the time that witchcraft was an initiatory priesthood. So I just never thought of it as anything else. It wasn't until years later, it was actually, I remember when Scott Cunningham book came out, and my first witchcraft high priestess was working at the occult bookstore, and I saw it on the shelf, and it said, Wicca, a guide for the solitary practitioner. And I said, what does that mean? What is that? I'd seen the word before, because even Buckland, but he didn't make a big to-do about it in that book. And I said, what does that mean? She looked at me, she goes, the beginning of the end. And I didn't know what any of that meant at the time. And I was like, oh, okay. Of course, then I bought the book because I was curious. What does it mean? I hated it. I hated it even then. I thought it was bollocks. I did.
Bollocks.
I really did. It was literally like the roadmap of this can be anything you want it to be. No one can tell you otherwise. But I'm going to give you our belief system based on our interpretation. You should accept that. But, aside the fact that I'm telling you what to believe, blah, 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 blah. I didn't like it, and I'd like it even less now, knowing the fact that he has his credentials, where he was originally a Hawaiian shaman, redheaded white guy, a Hawaiian shaman. And he got hooked up with Llewellyn, who was, most people don't know, an initiate of Lady Sheba. And if you know anything about the craft, she was basically a fraud, and she's iconic. We get that. But,
Iconic Austin.
Yes, she is a bit of a fraud. So Llewellyn became very bitter about that, and that explains a lot about the Llewellyn movement. Well, Scott Cunningham was actually an initiate of Llewellyn. So put those dots together and figure out why he was the biggest Llewellyn seller and why it was a narrative. And it worked. As far as a public platform for witchcraft, absolutely. But it was anti-priesthood from the beginning to the end. Nothing about it supported priesthood or initiation at all. It was completely anti. And it created a movement that persists to this day. And it's based on someone who had no authority or credentials to be doing it.
I'll give you $10 if you can remember my actual question.
I thought the question was, why is it?
I'm kidding.
I was just about to ask you, but it was.
I could have given you a general idea.
I'm kidding, Brian.
Why is it important to be identified as priesthood?
Yes,
as
why do you?
opposed to,
I thought that the place to end is why.
How did we get into? Did I just?
You just
You
did.
went
Oh,
into
sorry.
Nobody else.
It's totally fine, baby.
Somebody said Scott
Why is that
Cunningham.
important?
And you got triggered. It's a trigger for him. So,
I detest
High
his
Priestess.
witchcraft books. His herb books are
honored
fun.
guest and High Priestess. Why do we need to hold on to this? Why will you keep your priesthood essential to you?
I think, and sorry if this offends anybody, but I think that it's important to distinguish between the priesthood and the congregation. I think that some people are driven to pursue magic, the occult, witchcraft as a personal journey, and that's great. And I think it's an important thing for us to have in our society. But I think that some people are driven to do it for bigger reasons than that, for preserving worship of the gods, for serving a higher purpose. Sorry if that sounds like... But I think that's important. I think throughout human history, there have been a cast of people who felt drawn to traditions that meant something bigger than themselves, and I think that it's important to have that, and in whatever religion, but I think, you know, as this is our chosen and called to religion, that for us this is something that we need to do to serve the gods, to serve humanity, to serve the universe, whatever you want to call it, to feed into something bigger than ourselves.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
To the brides of Satan.
Absolutely. Big fan.
I don't know, I want to clink.
You have to. It's over.
Okay, it's done.
So
Too late now.
I'll answer my own question.
Black Phillip.
Black Phillip, to our dark Lord, may he bless us and reign over us always. Our Father who art below. All joking aside, I'm not a Satanist. I think, why do I want to hold on to it? Number one, I completely agree. There's always been a separation between those who are called to serve and those who simply want to experience or taste, and that's perfectly fine. It's not wicked or bad, or it's not egalitarian or lesser, no. But
Just
in
not
life,
as good as.
why am I going to hold on to it, though? Levi, why me as a person?
He's an elitist.
100%. But all that aside, in life you have some choices, and some people are very comfortable and okay with, I just want my job, I just want my life, I just want, to date, I just want to experience some things, and that's cool. But if you want the love that shatters all loves, if you want the dream that shatters all dreams, if you want transcendence, then there are certain choices you will have to make, and they require commitments and oaths and beliefs and choices and responsibility, massive responsibility. And that is priesthood, and I choose it. I choose it over being mundane and boring.
Yeah.
All I can do is cackle at this point.
If you want ecstasy, you have to pay for it.
You have to pay for
whether it's a drug or a god.
Yep. You know what? I think that is the perfect place
They're not
to say.
mutually exclusive.
Anyway, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Hold on.
Thanks.
We don't know. We haven't planned our next episode because and I forgot to plug it, but I will do it now. So I'm off to Salem very shortly, and I'll be hosting the Witches Ball there, the month of October, yada, yada, yada. So there are still tickets available for the Witches Ball, and is Friday, October 25th is the night of the ball. So there are still some tickets available. And, Christian and I and Val will
Lady Val
be
will be
in
there.
October,
The Welsh witch
showing all these people how they're doing it wrong or how to do it
Love
right.
her.
Actually, that's the better
She
thing.
will hate all of these references to
Yes, she will.
herself.
100%.
Just saying.
Yes, but she's going to have
She's
fun.
not self-promoting.
Anyway,
she will be masked and hidden, so she will only reveal herself to
Oh,
those
I
who
don't
are
know.
worthy.
She wants that top hat. That doesn't
I
seem
know.
very...
She might do it tomorrow.
Giving it away. She's not going to wear the hat now just because.
Anyway, if you're available, she lives she's actually a very powerful Welsh witch queen, and she lives in a palace in Oswestry. And she
Next to the Masonic Lodge.
has an entire, diary of jewels hidden. She acts like she's poor.
Like
so,
Bilbo Baggins.
men who might be opportunists
Kept her dragon treasure.
need not
I know
apply.
one can find it.
But anyway, yes, we're off. So Levi and I have not scheduled the next show.
But we shall.
Either be next week or when I get back. But anyway,
Thank you so much for inviting me to come on your
Oh, it's so
show.
fun. Thank you for
Pleasure.
coming.
Thank you for coming.
Yes. All right.
And
Bless.
There were covens in Europe.
Blessed
That's what
be.
they're called.
Blessed
The
be.
congregation.
All the bees.
Covens in
BBC.
Europe, in
bees.
America, and in Australia, and they have one right here.